instead of a how-to manual. Anarchy is ours to create. So how do we get started? Different kinds of anarchists will be inclined to chart very different courses towards anarchy. Despite what you might have concluded by now, I'm not really a doctrinaire ideologue. I think there's merit in lots of different strategies. I think a lot of them are complementary. And I think most of them are worth exploring. One of the basic convictions underlying anarchism, I've realized while writing this book, is that people are wonderfully, gloriously, startlingly diverse. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to working for anarchy. First, I have no illusion that most of the people who read this book and find what I've said convincing have any obligation to focus on deliberately pursuing the emergence of a stateless society. People have different goals, commitments, concerns, interests, responsibilities, and passions. That's okay. And second, even for someone who does make political activism a priority, there's no single right strategy to pursue. That's true because the free choices of other people always render the outcomes of our actions uncertain. It's true because even if no one had the capacity for free choice, there would be no way to tell just what the results of pursuing a given course of individual action would be. It's also true because there are many different valuable goals and many different reasonable ways of realizing those goals. In general, it doesn't make much sense to say that one morally good choice brings about more good overall than another. So I have no mandate for anyone, except recognize the value in what other people are doing, even if it's not what you might be inclined to want to do yourself. Various strategies are likely to be successful in different environments. Experiment, see what works, and listen to what other people have to say. Start freeing your mind. It's tough to free other people when you're not free yourself. It's too easy to get caught up in unloading your own emotional baggage or to become a humorless, self-righteous crusader, the mirror image of the statist authority figure you'd like to leave in the dust. Take the time to figure out how structures of authority and domination are replicated, not just at gunpoint, but in families, schools, and religious congregations, and, indeed, in your own mind and heart. Are past authority figures, teachers, parents, pastors, bosses, still running your life from inside your head? Are you still engaged in angry, repressed conflicts with people who aren't really present? How much importance do irrational guilt and fear play in your life? Go to work on these questions with yourself, with trusted friends, perhaps with a therapist or spiritual guide. Make sure you're ready to offer other people genuine freedom, rather than trying to impose your own ideological rigidity and to validate your own beliefs by making converts when you talk with them about the appeal of a stateless society. Work on freeing yourself from anger and resentment, too. You'll burn yourself out, turn other people off, and run the risk of making unwise, even destructive decisions if your activism flows from negative emotions. People will be attracted to your cause. You will find energy and inspiration to keep working for that cause, and you'll be more likely to help take that cause in useful directions if your commitment to a free society reflects genuine love for other people and for yourself. Build liberating friendships. Most of your friends won't be anarchists. Many of them may never take anarchism seriously. That's okay. It's not your job to turn them into clones of yourself. And the success of your efforts to build a stateless society doesn't depend on everyone's coming to share your beliefs. Your friendships certainly don't need to be political. The last thing we need is the kind of grim review of personal relationships for ideological correctness that has marked too many political movements across the spectrum. Anarchism is about living a good life, and friendship is a marvelous aspect of human welfare. It's a good thing whether your friends agree with you about anything at all, and you pervert it if you turn it into an opportunity for proselytizing. And of course, nothing stops you from working on particular campaigns with friends who may disagree with you significantly about many or most issues. However, the most important way to get people excited about the possibility of liberation is to connect with them personally. Doing so is a lot more useful, a lot more effective than posting a YouTube video of yourself delivering a PowerPoint presentation. Building genuine human bonds with people enables them to understand your concerns and your objectives, and to see why they might be attractive. If you do want to engage with people politically, don't lecture from a position of authority. Talk to them about problems and frustrations, experiences of moral outrage at state abuses, or fears about state authority, discoveries of alternatives to state-based ways of doing things. Ultimately, people are more loyal to their friends than they are to movements or ideas. People will do things to support their friends that they are less likely to do to support abstract ideologies. Share the possibility of freedom with your friends, undogmatically and generously, and you'll make the cause of anarchism immeasurably stronger. Change small-scale institutions. Authoritarianism begins at home. When children are old enough to understand arguments, but parents still insist that they be obeyed because they are parents, or because children live in their homes, they reinforce the message that deference to positional authority is a basic and inescapable part of life. Parents who treat their children in demeaning ways or who use physical force against them when they'd never do so against adults send the message that people in authority answer to different rules than others do, and that aggressive or punitive violence is an acceptable way to solve problems. If the kind of personality that births the state is nourished in authoritarian, brutal home environments, then, if you care about making the world state-free, it's worth taking a look at what goes on in your own home, and in some extreme cases, those of others. The same patterns we see in homes are also evident in schools and religious congregations. Rigid learning formats require deference to teachers' positional authority, and violently enforced attendance rules all stifle individuality and breed an attitude marked simultaneously by acceptance of authority and the resentful desire to escape its sting by becoming able to exercise it over others. Think about how schools in your community are organized and about whether alternatives are feasible. Similarly, religious congregations can be seedbeds of authoritarianism. Clerics who act as if they have special access to revealed truth, who imply that they lack the failings they assail in members of their congregations, who generate false guilt for disregarding their authority or engaging in taboo violations that harm no one, all contribute to the creation of a mindset of resentful servility. In addition, many clerics proclaim the importance of acknowledging the legitimacy of other authority figures, including parents, women's male life partners, and state officials. Just watch the patriotic displays on state-proclaimed holidays. If you're part of a religious congregation, reflect on how your congregation is organized and how you can contribute to making it a welcoming, liberating place in which people build friendships with each other and cooperate to care for their community. Work to ensure that members of the clergy understand that they work for the benefit of the congregation, rather than seeing you as a subordinate. Raise your voice to oppose authoritarianism, especially when it has the potential to influence children's attitudes, and state worship from the pulpit. A healthy congregation can provide an alternative to the state, a community that puts a very different conception of inclusion and mutual empowerment on display. Help yours to be this kind of congregation instead of one that underwrites the state's authority. Help others get out of the state's grasp. Military forces and law enforcement agencies probably do more to prop up the state's authority than any other organizations. Help to delegitimize these organizations. Make people aware of the destructive things the state orders them to do, and let people know about the violent things they do even when they're not acting under orders. You can work with coalitions in your community that oppose police abuse, perhaps especially in the interests of various marginalized groups, members of ethnic minorities, women, illegal immigrants, or LGBT people. And you can encourage the people you know who want to make a difference not to join the state's standing army or police force, and to explore alternative ways of achieving the goals good people might want to serve by enlisting, making peace, and providing others with security. Engage in litigation. Sadly, a lawsuit is unlikely to topple the state, but individual lawsuits can undermine the state's arbitrary authority. A lawsuit might make it easier for someone to avoid serving in the state's military forces, or keep the state from preventing someone from working just because someone else wants a monopoly. Targeted litigation efforts can help to erode authoritarian power, as they undermined state-mandated school segregation in the middle third of the 20th century. Consider participating in a litigation effort as a lawyer, a plaintiff, if you're likely to be an appealing one, a researcher, a financial supporter, or a publicist. Pursue electoral strategies. There are both strategic and moral reasons to be skeptical about electoral politics. Involvement in electoral politics may sap energy and resources, and it may encourage both voters and would-be office holders to overestimate the actual potential of government to change things and to treat the continued existence of the state as acceptable. In addition, people who are actually elected to public office may become co-opted. They may become participants in, rather than opponents of, the almost inevitable expansion of state power. Participation in electoral politics may come to involve actual complicity in the state's injustice. These claims may finally be persuasive, but I think anarchists ought at least to consider whether involvement in electoral politics might sometimes be a reasonable strategy for fostering effective social change. Whether such involvement wastes time and energy in a given case is a situation-specific judgment that may require more knowledge of the consequences of action than will often or ever be possible. It may sometimes lead to undesirable beliefs about the state and the ineffectiveness of state-related strategies for change, but it seems to me that it might nonetheless prove reasonable, given its possible consequences, including both an increase in public awareness and possible changes in law and policy. There's no way of answering the moral question, I think, without answering more fundamental questions about moral judgment that hardly belong in a book like this. So I'll simply offer my view in conclusory form. I believe that you're complicit in injustice if you purposefully support the injustice or act unreasonably to increase the likelihood that it will occur. And I believe that involvement in a political campaign, or indeed candidacy for or work in a political office, need not involve you in doing either. It might, of course, and the temptation may prove especially hard to resist for someone who sees her or his political goal as improving the machinery of state, making things run more efficiently, throwing out the rascals, or restoring the level of state activity to its optimal or constitutionally permissible level. Certainly, as long as we're stuck with a state, we have every reason to want it to be less costly, less destructive, more fair. But if improving the state, rather than eliminating it, becomes a politician's goal, she or he is going to find it extremely difficult not to become part of the state and to participate, perhaps unintentionally, perhaps unreflexively, in the almost irresistible ongoing expansion of its power. Someone who's really committed to anarchism has the best chance of making a positive difference politically if she or he understands that the state can't be healed, that it has to be eliminated. Given, though, that some kinds of political involvement might sometimes make strategic and moral sense for anarchists, there are several forms of involvement that might be appropriate. A candidate could run and be supported by others under the banner of a party seeking to restrain, roll back, or eliminate the state, or as a candidate for nomination by another party, primarily so the candidate and her supporters can take advantage of the publicity surrounding the campaign to highlight an anarchist position on relevant issues. A candidate could run and be supported by others under the banner of a party seeking to restrain, roll back, or eliminate the state with the purpose of winning the office for which she's a candidate. Obviously, this kind of approach will make sense in a limited number of cases, since the majority of voters in all Western societies are affiliated with parties that are, to say the least, state-friendly. Since those parties control the machinery of government, and since those parties are likely to make it very difficult for a state skeptic to succeed politically. This kind of approach would have a greater chance of success in a relatively small community in which anarchists and their sympathizers were present in reasonably large numbers. Anarchists might support a candidate for office or nomination affiliated with a mainstream party if the candidate personally seeks to restrain, roll back, or eliminate the state, whatever the party's own agenda. Of course, this kind of approach is risky, insofar as a candidate associated with a statist party may actually share significant elements of the party's statist agenda. In addition, even if she doesn't, she may still be susceptible to pressure from others within the party not to undermine some of that agenda. However, because of the substantial influence elected officials can exert, this kind of approach might occasionally make sense. There might be times when any of these strategies might be reasonable for an anarchist to follow. It might also make sense for anarchists to involve themselves in supporting referenda in communities that allow for legislation by voters. A carefully crafted initiative could play a very effective role in reducing the power of the state. Consider as an example California voters' recent approval of an initiative creating legal space for the distribution of medical marijuana. I wouldn't for a moment deny the reasonableness of the critical questions about involvement in electoral politics I mentioned earlier. But I think appropriately selected election campaigns can create meaningful opportunities to advance an anarchist agenda.